Welcome in, everybody. It's been a busy week of development, so let's get right into it. I know I said I was going to work on the weapon swap functionality this week, but I decided to work on the spawn system instead. I want this game to be playable in many different configurations, including single player, split screen, and online multiplayer, with or without a dedicated server. While this is great for gameplay, it definitely adds some complexity. Instead of desperately making old features work with new play configurations, I'd rather implement all the play configurations and test each feature against all of them right away. I'm not naive enough to think that I won't have to make changes down the line, but the goal here is to minimize rework on existing features, which will help me get to the finish line faster. So, why is making a spawn system so complicated, you ask? To answer that question, we need to define the concept of possession in Unreal Engine, which surprisingly works a lot like it does in horror movies. When a character is spawned into a game, it can either be possessed by an AI player or an actual person playing the game. In most games, characters are either AI or player, with them never needing to switch between the two possession states. Spawning in characters using this AI or player framework is actually pretty simple. All you do is put these player start objects around the map and set the default character. At that point, whenever a player joins the game, we find an available player start and spawn them in already possessing the default character. Problem with that, though, is we want specific characters in our game that will be different from each other depending on the team info that's entered in the scenario editor. We also want to make sure that we always spawn the same amount of characters that the scenario settings tells us to. This way, the game will play the same no matter if we're offline with bots or online with 100 of our closest friends. So, to meet all our needs, we're going to have to do quite a bit of work. The first thing I did was make this spawn region object to make using the scenario editor easier. Instead of placing hundreds of these player starts, we can just place a few of these spawn regions to get the same effect. I'll also set them up so we can change their sizing as needed, which will be an important feature when we get into the scenario editor. They also change their color and text depending on the team and stage of the scenario assigned to them. I also made these map objects that will represent static objects people place in the scenario editor. We need a way to quickly save off these objects from the editor and then reproduce them exactly as they were, and these map objects will accomplish that perfectly. As you can see, we are starting from a blank level and the map objects and spawn regions are being dynamically placed, which is definitely pretty cool. Now that we have everything we need, the first step in the spawn process is to load our scenario settings. I had to make a placeholder set of settings to test with though, because we don't have the editor up and running just yet. Once we load in our scenario settings, we need to spawn in and initialize our spawn regions and then our map objects according to the scenario settings. Once we hear from all of them that they're all set up, we can then spawn in our characters according to our team and character info. The final step is to take all the physical players we have and assign each of them a character to possess. We now have a spawn system that will flawlessly handle any scenario with any combination of teams, characters, and player configurations that we throw at it. I'll admit that testing this took quite a bit, as I wrote just over 1,000 lines of code to make this system, and there were definitely a few issues. With that being said, though, things are definitely looking great, and I'm excited to move on to the next step. I'm honestly a little tired of looking at the spawn system after this week, so my plan for next week is to get the weapon swapping functionality done and maybe start working on character movement so things will look a bit more exciting than they do currently. So until next time, I've been Steve, and I'll see you all in a week.